Now, today, a judge did rule that prosecutors will be able to use Young Thug's own rap lyrics as evidence against him. Now, his trial regards gang and racketeering charges. I want to get to Fox 5's Tyler Fingert. He has the latest on this case.
Despite the defense team's objections, the judge ruled that rap lyrics can be included as evidence in the Young Slime Life trial. Today's decision came after an hours-long hearing ended late last night.
This is evidentiary use.
You've got something that is unfairly prejudicial, which is what rap music is.
After more than 7 hours of arguments,
Courts had an opportunity to ponder the issues that were presented.
Fulton County Chief Superior Court Judge Ural Glanville ruled 17 sets of rap lyrics can be used as evidence in the Young Slime Life RICO trial. The 6 defendants are accused of a long list of violent crimes, including murder.
I'm going to conditionally admit particularized lyrics.
Prosecutors say those lyrics are in rap songs by several of the defendants, including Atlanta rapper Young Thug, whose real name is Jeffrey Williams. Several of the lyrics are too explicit for TV, but here are some we can read. Quote, "I shot at his mommy, now he no longer mentioned me." Another one reads, quote, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Yak Gotti. I got bodies on bodies."
These are party admissions. They happen to come in the form of lyrics, Judge.
The defense teams had argued against their use, saying it's protected speech and it would prejudice the jury.
If you let this in, nobody should ever say anything to anybody else.
While Judge Glanville will allow the lyrics, he made it clear prosecutors can't just throw words out. They have to tie them to the case.
Anything that the court may rule upon at this point in time will be subject to a complete foundation being met.
For now, these are the only lyrics that can be introduced, but prosecutors reserve the right to ask for more down the road. Today's decision comes just a few weeks before the trial is expected to begin on November 27th. Outside the Fulton County Courthouse, Tyler Fingert, Fox 5 News.
Thank you to Tyler Fingert reporting down there in Atlanta. Now, so many questions, regarding the judge's decision to allow these lyrics to be used as evidence. So earlier today, I sat down with a former federal prosecutor just to dissect this entire decision and see what's going to come out of this case going forward. Here's our conversation. I'd like to bring into the conversation now former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani. And I just want to dive in a little bit here because this seems like a First Amendment issue. Now, why wouldn't someone assume that lyrics, artistic expression could be protected under the First Amendment?
Well, the First Amendment is a great argument, but really it's not the argument that applies in this case. And this is why. The First Amendment says that the government can't prosecute you for speech. But Young Thug isn't being prosecuted for his speech. This is a question of evidence. Can his own words, can those rap lyrics be used against him as evidence? So he's not being charged for it, but it's being admitted against him from an evidence perspective. And that's why the judge ruled against him.
So I know that Young Thug here charged under Georgia's RICO Act. Explain to our viewers, where does this play in this entire case?
So RICO has commonly been used to prosecute corrupt or criminal organizations. It started with the mob, but we're seeing it used recently in a wider variety of cases. We've seen it used in sex cult cases, criminal street gangs, which is what the allegations are here, and even in the case involving Donald Trump there in Fulton County. So prosecutors are getting a lot more creative. They're getting a lot more aggressive. And the advantages of a RICO charges, it brings a lot of defendants in, and they can be held responsible for any criminal acts and further into the organization. So let's say they didn't actually pull the trigger or they weren't the shot caller, but they were involved in the organization itself. They can be held criminally responsible, and it puts a lot of pressure on defendants to flip and plead guilty, which is something that we're seeing happen in the Trump case.
So I know here when it comes to Young Thug right now, prosecutors, they're going to be challenged with proving that these lyrics, they coincide with real live events. How difficult do you expect that to be?
Well, that's what the judge said. The judge said that just because the evidence comes in potentially doesn't mean that it's going to be dispositive. So prosecutors are going to have to somehow connect those lyrics to actually facts in the case. And I think really the most damaging ones to Young Thug are the lyrics that relate to shooting up a Tahoe, because one of the alleged victims in the case, Donovan Thomas, was killed in a Tahoe, and there were a lot of shell casings around.
Have you seen similar cases where artists have been prosecuted over, their artistic expression where that's come back to haunt them during a trial?
This is all novel legal ground. This is something that we haven't seen until really recently, when rappers are being prosecuted and prosecutors are trying to introduce their lyrics. Now, there's two ways they may come in. One is just a general discussion of violence. And I think that's a little bit of a tougher argument. But if you have specific rap lyrics that are connected to a specific alleged crime, I think that makes it easier for them to come in. Now, there's been a lot of pushback by artists, the recording industry, and what we're seeing is legislation. So, for instance, my home state of California, there's legislation on the books that prohibits this. Again, this is a rule of evidence, and the rules of evidence can be changed. The First Amendment, of course, is part of the Constitution. So we're seeing states that are a little bit more liberal, like New York and California, where a lot of these artists live, trying to change the rules so this doesn't happen in the future.
Is there a way for artists to protect themselves? Because, of course, at the beginning of this conversation, we said that the First Amendment could be maybe a good argument. It doesn't apply in this case. So what can artists do to make sure that they can express themselves still and not be worried about being prosecuted for that in the future?
They really need to change the law, because the law as it exists says that admissions of a party, they're admissible. They're not hearsay. So whatever anyone says can be used against them. We've all heard that famous expression, right? Anything you say can and will be used against you. Doesn't matter if it's something on social media. Doesn't matter if it's something in the artistic realm. There really are no exceptions. Of course, unless it's privileged, which is something that, for instance, you might tell your lawyer. But absent a privilege, any admission by a party in a case can be used against them, unless there is a law that prohibits it. And that's why we're seeing this effort to change the rules of evidence when it comes to admission of these types of rap lyrics.
Neema, you did mention a little earlier on that this is kind of new ground when it comes to prosecuting artists, Young Thug specifically, other co-defendants in this case. So what are you most looking forward to seeing when watching this trial play out?
Well, when this indictment came down, I thought to myself, I mean, there is no way the district attorney is going to be able to prosecute dozens of people at once. I mean, just imagine, right? Each witness that gets up there, the deputy district attorney or the assistant does the examination. Then you have a dozen or more defense lawyers that are asking questions. I mean, jury selection has already taken months in this case because it's just going to go on for so long. So, obviously there's different legal strategies. Most prosecutors like to, parse things out a little bit more, maybe charge a few co-defendants at once. But you see Willis in Atlanta with this real kitchen sink approach. And it's not just the Young Thug and YSL case. We see this happening in, other cases, such as Donald Trump's case. But I think after a certain point, it just becomes much too unwieldy. It's too much for the judge and jurors to sort through. And I think that's what we're seeing here.
Neema, just one final question, because I know you're a former prosecutor, but what do you think the defense is going to do to be able to argue against these motions when it comes to the lyrics? What do you think is going to be their strategy?
I think there's two strategies that the defense is going to have. The first is the First Amendment argument, which we talked about, right? The First Amendment protects you from being prosecuted for your free speech. Again, Young Thug, no one's being prosecuted for this speech. It's just evidence that's being used to prosecute a murder in a RICO case. I think the other argument the defense is going to raise is that this is improper character evidence. So what does that mean? You can't be prosecuted for being a bad person or even being a violent person, even if you have a prior criminal history. Normally, that evidence doesn't come in because really the question is, in the case is, was Young Thug, were the other co-defendants, were they responsible for this criminal activity in connection with the organization, the predicate RICO acts? Were they responsible for murders and attempted murders, not just being bad people? So I expect the defense to continue to pound that argument and say this is improper character evidence, and we'll see if that carries the day.
Neama Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, we appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox, helping us look ahead in this trial. Like I said, major ruling today. Lyrics going to be used against Young Thug, several other co-defendants. We look forward to checking in with you as we see how this all plays out in the court.
Thanks for having me.